Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the school board meeting for Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021 for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Ms. Jenkins, could you please take the roll?
Mr. Barron.
Here.
Ms. Bradley.
Here.
Ms. Caldwell Johnson. Mr. Cody.
Here.
Ms. Delagardelle. Ms. Martirano.
Here.
Ms. Sawyer.
Here.
The first item of business is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Martirano, so moved.
Sawyer, second.
We have a motion by Ms. Martirano and a second by Ms. Sawyer. Ms. Jenkins, please take the vote.
Mr. Barron.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Mr. Cody.
Yes.
Ms. Martirano.
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
The vote is approved 5-0. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our meeting on Tuesday, July 6, 2021. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Sawyer, so moved. Sawyer, second.
We have a motion by Mr. Cody and a second by Ms. Sawyer. Ms. Jenkins, please take the vote.
Mr. Barron.
Abstain.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Mr. Cody.
Yes.
Ms. Martirano.
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
The vote is approved, 4 and 1 abstaining. Next on the agenda is the public forum. We provide speakers at the forum an opportunity to address the board for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the board agenda. If anyone wishes to speak to this forum, please email aaron.jenkins@dmschools.org. Speakers will be called individually, and we ask that you please state your name and address prior to providing comments. Guests of the board are encouraged to speak to matters relating to the program, services, and operations of DMPS. Please remember that Iowa law prohibits us from discussing specific employees or their job performance. Please avoid references to personalities or character attacks, as those types of comments do not contribute to the purpose for which this public forum exists. Thank you for your support of our school district. We appreciate and value your input. As a reminder to the board and public, this public forum is not a time for board engagement discussion. It is our obligation to discuss only matters posted in the public agenda for the sake of transparency and opportunity afforded to all community stakeholders. Matters requiring attention will receive appropriate staff and/or board follow-up at a time after the meeting. Ms. Jenkins, do we have any speakers?
We do. First up is Heather Brady.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I am Heather Brady. I live at 634 39th Street in Des Moines. I am speaking to HF 802. I'm very concerned about it, and I'd like to tell you why. I'm the mother of a 9-year-old boy who attends Greenwood Elementary in DMPS. I'm also a liberal arts professor at Grandview University, where I've taught general education courses in global awareness and diversity for the past 7 years. My courses focus on African history, culture, and social justice. I also act as a leader for other instructors of this class. In our curriculum, we talk about privilege, bias, and discrimination. We discuss systemic racism and sexism. Those all seem like concepts that are deemed divisive by HF 802. While students of color have long had these conversations outside the classroom, white students can be sometimes uncomfortable with these conversations. Some feel vulnerable and defensive. However, this kind of teaching has brought depth to our curriculum and to our student culture at Grandview. One core belief behind this legislation is that we ought to look beyond race and opt instead for color blindness. These make us who we are. Our identity makes us who we are. Most of the students I have had over the past 7 years agree with this kind of teaching. They can handle sensitive conversations, do not wish to go backward in time to a time of ignoring our differences. I believe we must set high expectations of our students and ourselves, not just college students. We must ask our students to think critically about their privileges and biases. My 9-year-old has asked me countless questions over the past few years. We've spoken about George Floyd protests, about Me Too, about the elections. He is comfortable using the words racism and sexism to describe what he sees going on around him. He derives strength and perspective from understanding his own privilege. My son will have the freedom to ask questions and to name the world in a way that I did not. I grew up in a very protective bubble created by the white communities that fled the city of Detroit after the summer of 1967. These riots grew out of Black protesters decrying the effects of segregation and poverty. When the first Black family moved into our middle-class neighborhood in the mid-1970s, my parents and others were bitter, thinking it would bring down their property
30
value.
seconds.
This suburb, just sitting 5 miles from the city of Detroit, has become one of the wealthiest in the country. There are other brutal stories to tell about racism of that time and place, but I do not want this fate for our youth. I want them to be able to formulate questions about the world around them if they're not taught how to do so in the Des Moines public school system. It is deeply distressing. It is also distressing to think we have not come far from the time and era that I grew up in. It is our leaders are now yearning for a bygone era in creating and imposing HF 802. I will do what I can do to break these bubbles up, and I hope you will do this as well. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next up, we have Oliver Brandon.
Hi, my name is Brandon Oliver. I live at 3021 Southwest 29th Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50321. In my opinion, adult accountability is our district's biggest needed area of growth when it comes to treatment of students and staff. A few months ago, I was thankful for a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Ahart. At one point during the conversation, in his own words, he assured me he can take criticism. I find this to be a sign of a great leader, to be able to take criticism. Acceptance of criticism is usually easy to identify, especially if the person says something like, "You're right, I need to be better at that," or "It was wrong of me to even think that." We all make mistakes, and in a public school district, I feel the importance of publicly accepting criticism is crucial. I hope when someone makes a harmful mistake, even if it's unintentional, that it's addressed in the moment. It concerned me greatly to hear a board member in the July 21st work session say, quote, "just because a kid's a shithead," end quote. To me, this comment and line of thinking shows a lack of care and understanding for the social emotional needs of our students. It dehumanizes a stressed child, and it does not represent the best model of urban education. I was saddened to hear this comment was silently excused in the moment. I know the board is aware of the power of words and SEL based on the board goals. I do not feel this kind of behavior should be excused or normalized. In the same session, 2 female board members were addressed on their frustration, even though they never used derogatory language and took the time to reiterate anti-racist findings from the town halls, which have been repeatedly talked about for a year. So this showed a silent acceptance of a man referencing students with a derogatory term, while implying women need to be more calm when they're using respectful language, a double standard for men and women. Fortunately, however, we can learn from this, since we are, after all, an organization for learning. I'm hopeful the superintendent will more likely show equitable treatment of students and staff when each and every board member becomes a model of treating each other equitably and with dignified accountability in the moment. I feel it is respectful to help someone be a better version of him, her, or themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rebecca Duffy.
Okay, can everyone hear? I'm here to speak about COVID-19 precautions that are being held or taken by the Des Moines Public School District. I recognize the pivotal role that in-person school plays for child development. And while I'm really excited for my first grader to get back to school, I'm concerned about the risk facing unvaccinated children this fall. And anyone under age 12 can't be vaccinated. So that would be most children in elementary school. Science has consistently demonstrated the effectiveness of facial coverings in preventing the spread of coronavirus among students and people of all ages. By enacting Iowa Code Section 280.31 earlier this year in May, the Iowa legislature limited the ability of the school board, superintendent, and individual school principals from mandating or making a school-wide or district-wide mask mandate. However, this provision does not bar parents from requesting an individual classroom be available for those students who voluntarily commit. They are voluntarily committing to wear a facial covering at school in order to protect themselves and others from COVID-19. But the key is we know that masks are most effective in creating a safe classroom when everyone is wearing them. In addition, online learning should not be the only safe option made available for children in our district. My child loves school, and she should not be left to learn in an isolated environment when there is a simple, safe, low-cost measure available for her safety and the safety of her classmates. This pandemic is really proving to be a marathon and not a sprint. We can't just throw our hands up and say that we're done because the virus doesn't act that way. It does not care if we're all getting tired and sick of these measures. We have to keep ahead of it. It's been brought to my attention that requests for opt-in classrooms have been dismissed in other Iowa school districts, including Ames and Johnston. However, due to the perceived logistics, and I understand that there are logistics involved with this request, but I would urge this board to at least survey parents within the district to determine whether a logistical burden actually exists. Is there actually a burden, or are you just not wanting to do it and throwing your hands up? So accordingly, I would ask that the leaders of the district and the individual schools take steps to identify parents and teachers who'd like to learn in an environment where everyone has committed to wearing a facial covering, the words of the Iowa legislature, facial covering, during the school day, and work with parents and teachers to accommodate those requests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Tanya Keith.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My name is Tanya Keith, and I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak. I am also wanting to speak about the COVID-19 protocols in the school. I am the parent of 2 children, a first grader at the downtown school and a freshman in high school at Roosevelt and a recent Hoover grad. I am speaking today because I do not see my children's schools taking the COVID-19 Delta variant seriously enough. I am a long-haul COVID-19 survivor for the past 14 months. It took me months of physical therapy just to get back to being able to do my job, and I now have to take medication to help me concentrate because of COVID brain fog. I want DMPS to continue to take this pandemic with the utmost caution as the more contagious Delta variant spreads. In states with more mature outbreaks, Delta is putting kids in the hospital before school even starts. While it has only killed a few children, and it makes me sick to say that because we should be trying to have 0 deaths in our school children, it doesn't matter how low the death rate is because we know that 20 to 30% of survivors will end up with long haul symptoms like mine or worse, and that includes juvenile victims. Virtual cannot be the only answer. I'd like to ask you to go even further than Ms. Duffy did. My daughter did not thrive in virtual kindergarten last year. We discovered that she is likely facing dyslexia and must attend school in person to get the resources that she needs. Offering a virtual option is not enough. What is more important? Obeying a law that goes against CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics guidance and is against the Iowa Constitution home rule, Or should we be protecting the lives of our children in all DMPS K-12 classrooms? I don't want my vaccinated son to bring home a breakthrough case that infects our unvaccinated first grader. We must allow our children to get science-recommended protection from a deadly pandemic by requiring masks in all DMPS classrooms and facilities. If parents wish to have their children not be masked against scientific advice, let them be the ones to stay home and do virtual school. I should not have to choose between my daughter's literacy and protecting her from a deadly pandemic.
30 seconds.
That was my whole speech, but I will just close by saying home rule states that when there is a discrepancy between local rules and Iowa state law, the local rule should be held to a higher standard. It should be basically the most important. And if we can't use that home rule law to go against a law that has been put in place for political spite, then I don't know what it is for. We need to do more to protect our children. My daughter deserves an in-person education safely with universal masking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Genevieve Lifka-Rieselman.
Hi, it's actually Genevieve Lifka-Rieselman. I live at 1058 37th Street in Des Moines, Iowa. I am also speaking about COVID precautions as well as the online schooling options. I have two daughters. One graduated from virtual high school this past year and will be going to college. And she's going to have an amazing experience because she's going to New York State, but I'll just stop there with that. And then I have another daughter who should be going to 6th grade at Callahan this fall, but she also has cystic fibrosis with the changes that the state made last spring, as well as what we've heard about this fall. At this time, she'll be doing home instruction, and we're hoping she'll be able to do her speech and other IEP goals virtually. So two things I want to talk about. The first one is I saw in the news today that you're exploring a virtual option for our elementary school students. Well, I don't have an elementary school student anymore. I think this is a really important option that we need to have, but we really need to make sure it's high quality and that it's equitable, that any family who wants to take advantage of this is going to be offered a program that's doable, whether there's a guardian that's at home or a grandparent or a child care daycare worker. Because what I've heard about the company that was mentioned is that often it requires a lot of assistance from the adults in the home. We had an excellent experience with the virtual high school last year, and I think you guys are doing a great job with that. But I would rather have an in-person option. I mean, it took 6 months to get my daughter to leave the house after she became traumatized by what she was being told about COVID with her cystic fibrosis. And I would love to be able to send her to Callahan, but at this time, we just don't feel comfortable, especially because she'll turn 12 in October. I mean, we can see the end for her. So I'd really like for all of us as a community and the board as community members to really just be pushing vaccination, wearing masks. I've seen it on social media, and I really do appreciate that you guys are doing that, but I'd like to see more. Yesterday at the Polk County thing where they were speaking, they said that if you haven't been vaccinated, you're going to catch COVID. And I don't want that for my daughter, and I don't want that for any other community member. So I really hope better virtual options for our elementary school students, and let's really work to make in-person safe for everyone, because that's what's so important. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jesse Richardson-Jones.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
no, it's great. Okay, good evening. My name is Jesse Richardson-Jones. I live at 1318 39th Street in Des Moines. I'm the mother of two children, one of whom is a third grader at Perkins Elementary. I'm also a PhD trained scientist and a professional science and medical communicator. I'm going to build on what Rebecca Duffy shared, and actually what Genevieve just alluded to as well. So yesterday, Dr. Helen Eddy, the director of Polk County Health, said to Polk County residents, if you remain unvaccinated, you will get COVID. The only question is how sick you will become. And she urged everyone eligible to get vaccinated as soon as possible. But my third grader and every other child under 12 cannot be vaccinated yet. What should we do to keep our children safe until they can be? While we know children are less affected by COVID, they can become quite sick and sometimes for months. We still do not know the long-term consequences of COVID for our kids. We know that children spread COVID, especially the Delta variant, to others who can become very sick, like grandparents or the immunocompromised. And as the CDC told us this week, the Delta variant, which is as transmissible as chickenpox and is currently filling hospitals in several states in the country, it's changed our war on COVID. We must consider every weapon at our disposal right now to fight it. Many parents I've spoken with in the last couple of weeks want our children safely back at in-person school. And while the families of children under 12 don't have the most important weapon, vaccines, one potent weapon we can still use is masking. Masks protect both the wearer and those around them, and they provide the very best protection when everyone is wearing them. The best data we have from schools last year tells us that masks worked to protect kids from most in-school transmission of the original COVID strain. And conversely, schools that did not mask had higher levels of transmission. The American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC agree having everyone masked at schools this fall is our safest option. I understand that you will likely be approving an option for virtual school with a third-party vendor that would remove kids from their local schools. Although this is a vital option for children who are at the highest risk for adverse outcomes with COVID, it is far from sufficient for many kids who could be in classrooms safely if the right precautions are taken. We know that Iowa's mask mandate ban prevents you from requiring masks this year, despite CDC and APA recommendations. We feel that the best alternative to that for most kids is not third-party virtual school, but opt-in mask classrooms. By opt-in mask classrooms, we mean the choice for parents to place their students in a classroom with agreed upon rules that students wear a mask. And because parents have opted into a masked classroom, teachers can enforce this rule.
30 seconds.
Now is the time to act on this. Please contact our families and ask them, do you plan to send your children to school in masks this year? And if so, would you opt into a classroom in which mask wearing rules are enforced with your consent? You can make it clear that this isn't a mask mandate, it's a choice, the choice to keep our children safe at school. Please act on this as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And the last speaker we have is Katie Swalwell.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Katie Swalwell. I live at 4054 Amick Avenue in Des Moines. I was a tenured associate professor in the School of Education at Iowa State University and recently left that work to continue supporting organizations in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Last year, my child started 3-year-old preschool at Coles Elementary and participated in the virtual option. So part of why I'm here is to appreciate the teachers for their hard work and their creativity and flexibility during the pandemic. They were great. That being said, virtual preschool is not awesome. And for those kids under 12 who can't get vaccinated, I totally appreciate the other parents sharing what they did about having classrooms where mask mandates are enforced. I am thrilled with that option and would be very grateful for it. That I think that's a great idea. The other reason I'm here is to share my hope as a parent, not just as a professional educator, that the district stays committed to an education that sees all students, supports all students, challenges all students, and equips all students for an increasingly complex world. I grew up in West Des Moines, and when we were moving back to Central Iowa, my husband and I deliberately chose Des Moines so that our kids could attend schools with racial and socioeconomic and ethnic diversity in a district that was committed to addressing disparities. I'm very excited about the ethnic studies curriculum work and other efforts to make sure the district is providing culturally relevant pedagogy. As parents of kids who are white and affluent, it is incredibly important to me that they have an anti-oppressive education that helps them understand the world from different perspectives, be aware of and care about inequities and injustice, celebrate and value the contributions and experiences of people with different backgrounds than them, and have the tools to work across difference in respectful, healthy, productive ways to address a range of really complex problems facing our community. I know there's a lot of talk right now, and most of it is among parents who look like me with backgrounds like my own, that an anti-oppressive education or attention to equity is somehow divisive or intended to make their kids feel guilty. That is absurd, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's a dangerous argument, that perpetuates the status quo that is harming students in poverty, LGBTQIA plus students, Black, Indigenous, and students of color, and other students with minoritized and marginalized backgrounds. I know that an anti-oppressive education, when done well, helps people be in healthier, stronger community with each other by helping students see themselves as interconnected, to wonder about the experiences of others, to care about the harm done by systemic racism and economic inequality and sexism and other forms of oppression, to recognize the ways that many of their social positions privilege them, to support them in the development of healthy identities. To be specific, it is not racist to support my white kid in learning about white supremacy and racism and xenophobia.
30 seconds.
To avoid teaching about it, to deny kids opportunities to examine it and share their experiences, just perpetuates the ignorance and apathy that fuels racism today. As a parent of children who are privileged in many ways, I expect the schools to challenge them and to help them become skilled, aware, thoughtful, curious, knowledgeable, capable citizens who care about others in the world around them, an education that avoids controversial topics, that denies the historical and contemporary realities of so many people, harms everyone by perpetuating ignorance and bigotry. So in light of HF 802 making this also much harder than it has to be, and the ongoing pandemic that demands our attention, I ask you to please support the teachers and leaders in being culturally responsive, anti-oppressive. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have no further speakers for the public forum.
I would like to thank all of our speakers that spoke this evening. We value and appreciate your thoughts, and matters that are requiring your attention will receive the appropriate staff and our board follow-up at a time after this meeting. We will now move on to the next item of our agenda, which is consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to the agenda item, please email aaron.jenkins@dmschools.org. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. We appreciate your input. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to the agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. Ms. Jenkins, do we have any speakers?
We do. We have one, Brandon Oliver.
Hi, Brandon Oliver again. I live at 3021 Southwest 29th Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50321. I'm going to speak on the personnel recommendations. To my knowledge, it has been a struggle to fill vacant staff positions for this next school year. I understand the importance of having enough staff members. I feel the need to speak on a serious concern I see with our hiring and retention practices. Last summer, we found in the anti-racist town halls that the community wants improvement in this area. Simply put, students want staff members who look like them. Countless studies show it will improve math scores, reading scores, and SEL needs of our students. I'll even take it a step further. When staff members see people who look like them in leadership roles, then they also tend to have a greater sense of belonging. Last March, as you may remember from your emails, I asked once a week to see a plan which aims to improve our hiring and retention practices. And sadly, to this very hour, I still have not seen a plan. Even last week, I noticed we hired another white male as an executive director. And I don't use sarcasm when I say I'm sure he's well qualified for the position. My point is not whether or not he's qualified. My point is that we tend to send the message that nobody else is. I place no judgment on anyone in the list in this agenda item. However, I do question how we as a district are responding to the community's desire for improved hiring and retention practices. Are we who we claim to be? Do we as a district in our actions honestly show that Black Lives Matter, or that we want to stop Asian hate in our hiring and retention practices? Have any of you seen that plan? Think on the power structure in DMPS. Has it systemically changed in an anti-racist way since the town halls? Or are the same people exactly where they were? And who has the privilege to evaluate them? I don't feel it would be best to fire administrators across the district based on a position of power, but I do know that's what DMPS did with regards to vice principals and school improvement leaders a few years ago. I also don't feel it would be best to fire people based on their racial or gender identities. But if a leader isn't showing improvement and has no plan for improvement, then that doesn't really help students. And if leaders are asked to leave the district because they aren't showing improvement and their vacant jobs become opportunities for people who can serve students better, what is the plan to improve representation? Please keep your focus on student needs when deciding whether or not to approve this list. If you approve this list tonight, and you have not seen a plan for hiring and retention practices to be anti-racist, then I feel you are approving the absence of an anti-racist plan. Again, I don't say this as a comment about anyone on the list. I say this to hold the board and our district accountable. I asked a question in the SCAC meeting which received no answer. I'll ask a similar question tonight. How much longer will marginalized students and staff have to wait for our district to plan on hiring and retention practices to become equitable? Years, decades, centuries, how much longer? Until the public sees a plan, I think we should all assume there isn't one. If this list does improve the representation in our district, then I would still like to see the plan which supports this progress to continue. Tokenism and happenstance are not planned systemic changes. As a good friend of mine says, we need to be who we claim to be. If we're going to claim we're anti-racist, let's start acting in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no further speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver, for your comments this evening. Ms. Sawyer, I believe that you have the consent motion.
Yes, I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $11,003,678.01, and procurement card transactions in the amount of $818,033.97.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Sawyer and a second by Mr. Barron. Are there any discussions or questions?
I have questions regarding item C7, the proposal to purchase Edgenuity. And I sent many of my questions to Dr. Ahart this afternoon, but just want the public to be aware of some of the reality behind this contract. One being, is Edgenuity a 100% asynchronous tool?
Yes, essentially, Edgenuity is an asynchronous tool. And so it's really important that a family would choose this option, that they have somebody who can be at their child's side supporting them through this experience. We discussed at length and in depth several months ago the possibility of moving forward with accreditation for an elementary virtual campus. As you know, we did do that with our middle school to add that to the high school as a fully state accredited virtual option. I don't think that a virtual option for elementary is in the best interests in most cases for any elementary student. However, so we made the decision to not pursue accreditation. It would have been a tremendous investment, and it would have also, I think, sent the signal that we support a virtual option for elementary students, and especially given our SMART goals, we really need personal contact with our students, our teachers and students. Given the, I guess I'll use the term predicament that we find ourselves in relative to COVID and restrictions from the state on employing what we know to be best practice in terms of mitigation of virus spread. We wanted to provide, especially for those families who have a student who's at particularly high risk to contracting the virus, an option to stay with the district, keep their child at home. And the only option we had shy of making that huge long-term investment in an accredited virtual campus was to select from a state-approved I call it an off-the-shelf program. So we chose Edgenuity for a variety of reasons, but I am certainly not saying that this is what I would recommend for most students. However, for those families for whom a virtual option is the best option, we can keep those students with DMPS, and when they're comfortable and when conditions allow, they can transition back into a live classroom.
Thank you. How does the Edgenuity curriculum align with our current curriculum, specifically our EL curriculum, which has been a response to data in our monitoring reports, as well as our IM curriculum, which again has been a response to our students not currently achieving their goals? Does this have a similar cultural responsiveness, and does it align well with what we're currently doing at DMPS?
No, I would say the most culturally responsive aspect of Edgenuity is the variety of languages, 60 languages that are available for instruction, but it does not align with our EL curriculum or IM curriculum. It meets state alignment to the Iowa core, but that's as far as I'm comfortable saying it's aligned.
And something else that I noticed, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it up earlier, was the contract outlines 4 courses, up to 6 courses, and Chapter 12 requires those 3 electives in addition to our 4 core. So will we be compliant with Chapter 12 if we go down this path?
Yes, we will. So there's the 4 core that English language arts, mathematics, social studies, and science. And then there are, families can choose 2 of 3 elective choices as well. And so we will be providing a choice between music, art, and physical education, I believe are the 3 options. And through the Edgenuity contract, families can opt into 2 of those 3. And because it is state approved, we are in alignment as far as the state is concerned with Chapter 12 requirements.
Oh, okay. I was under the impression that we had to provide all 3 of those, art, music, and PE, with under Chapter 12. So thank you for that clarification.
If I could ask an additional question, Dr. Ahart, and this is only for 1 semester, so the hope may be that starting 2nd semester that potentially we'll have conditions will be different and kids will be back in classrooms. Is that the hope?
Yeah, we put the number of 300 just as a guess. We don't think we'll need that many seats, and we've only committed to Edgenuity for a semester. Now, if we'll gauge demand with our families, and if we still need to keep some seats available because of conditions, we can certainly do that without interruption. But my hope is that the need will dissipate, and we'll have all of our students in person.
And a quick follow-up to Ms. Martirano's question and you answered it, that you felt that this at least met state guidelines, but not necessarily alignment with our curriculum. Are you guys already talking through, and I know it's so early because we're just talking about this now, but talking through what will be potential needs for students then coming back into a classroom, adjusting to our curriculum at that point?
Yes, we will have staff, already employed staff who aren't officially Edgenuity teachers monitoring student progress. We'll still do the same testing that all of our students get, and working with their individual school buildings and the families to try to fill in gaps as we can, and then have a transition plan back when they decide that it's time to come back in person. That will be, that'll be a case-by-case basis, and certainly depending on the student, a rather smooth or relatively bumpy transition. I should also mention too that we will be connecting families by need with other individual identified needs such as special education, ELL, and gifted and talented, to try to keep as tight a connection as possible while those students who choose virtual are not actually in our physical presence.
That
I-
has, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to go beyond the conversation on the virtual option and talk a little bit more about the mitigation strategies that we have at our disposal in the district. Masks are really the maybe the best option that we have, and there's a real, obviously everybody understands we cannot require those in our buildings. Can teachers require them in their classroom?
Our current understanding is that no, teachers cannot require them in their classroom.
Okay. Can you talk through a little bit of the process on thinking out this idea of kind of having some classrooms where they would opt into just wearing masks versus and how that would work or wouldn't work?
Yeah, so we did discuss this as a team at length, the idea of surveying families and having families either opt into or opt out of mask required classrooms so that we could have students segregated by those that have committed to wearing a mask and those that have not committed to wearing a mask. Unless numbers fell out very evenly, building by building, to actually execute that, we would need to either have very lopsided class sizes, which would create an inequity, or we would have to move students from one building, from their home building to another building to level out the number of required sections at each grade level for masked and unmasked, or a combination of both of those things. And so, and then the issue would arise that if a family said that they wanted to opt into a mask classroom, but a child did not comply with mask wearing, then do we move that student to a classroom that their parents said they did not want the child in? Even though they said they wanted them in a mask classroom, if a child is non-compliant, we really don't have an avenue to compel compliance with a rule that we're disallowed from enforcing. So it appears through many conversations that the I hate this phrase because it's been used so much in the last year and a half, but that the cure would be worse than the disease. The other option would be to do that and then do as good a job as we could by building, which would mean that almost certainly we would have some students who wanted a fully masked classroom end up in a classroom that was not fully masked. So the best solution is not available to us, and so trying to come up with something that would be equitable and executable, this seems to be a bit of a pipe dream at this time. So that's why we opted in the end to not survey families. Not that that couldn't still happen, but we surveyed families and then could not actually provide them what they said they wanted. That seemed like an exercise in futility.
I get that, and I think that I understand it. I know that if I think you've clearly shown that if there was something you thought you could do, you would do it to keep folks safe. And what I would say is I would hope that we've 22 days away from the start of school, that we'll use as much of that time and continue using that time to try and be creative about how we can keep kids safe when they come back into buildings. I have zero problems with the requiring or opting into a fully masked classroom for my elementary age kid. But I also know, having done this for 8 years, that it's always easier to come up with the idea than it necessarily is to implement it in these buildings. You've got good creative people and they want to do the right thing. So I hope they'll spend as much time as they can over the next couple of weeks to figure out what that looks like, what options are available, and how to make that happen, in addition to all the other work that they've got to do to be ready for this academic year. The other level to this thing, I think, is just the politics of it all, and the politics of masks and vaccines and the state government imposing upon local jurisdictions rules that are contrary to the best interests of public health. It wouldn't surprise anybody to know that I put zero stock into those rules, and I believe I'm here as a human being, that's not just as an elected official. I have a responsibility to do what's right by other human beings. So I don't know, where this is going. I do not know what's coming, and what the next couple of months will bear for us. We were having a meeting earlier today, and this is very reminiscent to where we were at the beginning of August a year ago, when we didn't know a lot of things and we were waiting for a couple more weeks to better understand. I continue to be willing to do whatever is in the best public health interest of our families, and I will implore my colleagues to do that as well, without regard to the politics of the situation. And that's ultimately, that's got to be on us. That's not on Tom. Tom's here to do the will of the board, and we have to be willing to do the right thing if circumstances compel us to do so.
I would add that we stay in contact with Polk County Health Department, and it's been difficult to get a meeting scheduled with them to actually talk about protocols beyond mitigation. So what do we do with what will constitute an outbreak, for instance, and what will the quarantine rules be? We do have a meeting set up with Polk County Health on Friday, finally. So we will have more details to share with the board and the community after that meeting. But the degree of uncertainty that we have in regards to what's going to transpire with the pandemic, I would agree we are in an eerily similar situation as we were 12 months ago, not knowing. With all that we've learned about COVID-19, it's constantly evolving. The Delta variant certainly is showing some significantly different characteristics than the first version of COVID-19. There's a Lambda variant that is now present in at least 3 states. And if things progress the way they have been and the way they have since really January of 2020, we can expect that third variant to find its way to Iowa sooner rather than later as well. And that's a variant that we know precious little about at this time. So as near as the school year is, I do want the community to know that we are not ignoring the pandemic. And I certainly heard our speakers this evening. There's lots of trepidation among a lot of our families, particularly those families that have children under the age of 12 for whom a vaccine is not available, and especially those that have a pre-existing condition that makes them more susceptible, whether it's them themselves or a member of their family, where exposure may not result in the exposure at school may not result in an illness to the student, but may result in illness for a member of the family that ultimately gets exposed because of residing in the same home. So we continue to look for other options to improve mitigation, but we do need to be cognizant that there are certainly some state level restrictions that prevent us from doing what we know to be best practice. So there are a couple of people that spoke tonight that I'll be reaching out to get deeper thinking from, who obviously know a lot and follow the situation to see if we can't craft some more ingenious solutions to what's a real conundrum for the entire community and the country, frankly.
You had mentioned, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You had mentioned that staff will be monitoring student progress as they navigate through Edgenuity. Will that be a certified teacher?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the expected implementation timeline? I've implemented many pieces of software, including one similar to Edgenuity. Are we being promised a 3-week implementation, and will students that opt into a virtual learning environment using this tool be ready to start on the first day of school?
That is our expectation, yes.
You know, going back to Rob's questions and comments about mitigation, I would really prefer that we be able to get some mask opt-in rooms. I understand the challenges, but that'd be such a powerful tool if we could make that happen. But in the absence of that, have you considered any sorts of incentive structure for encouraging masks, and then tacked onto that perhaps vaccines with the older kids? And then a third question, I guess, would be, what are we doing to encourage vaccines from here until the rest of the kids are eligible?
And I'm sorry, Tom, Madam Chair, I'm really concerned about some of the questions that are coming up regarding our consent agenda item right now. Mitigation, masking, and COVID are not agenda items. And I would be happy to participate in a special meeting to discuss, but I really am concerned that this is not a posted agenda item.
Thank you, Ms. Martirano. I think we do need to save this discussion for another time. I do appreciate the superintendent bringing up some of those ideas, but I do think we need to table this if we're going to have a conversation about what mitigation efforts will look like, what we're going to do as far as possible mass classrooms. That I think that's a conversation that we need to have at another time, or we need to have a work session in which we have that conversation sometime yet still here in the month of August.
I'd just like to just note for the record that these are related topics, and it's up to a board member to determine whether the information that they're seeking is relevant to their vote up or down on an item. And so I appreciate where you're coming from, and I think it's fair for you to note that. But for the record, I want to say I don't think that this is a line of questioning that's out of line with our rules.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Barrett.
and
Go ahead.
And if we feel that it's within the realm of the approval of the purchase of software, like, I'm just, by all means, you guys know this, some of these rules better than I do, but I just want to be fully transparent with the community. And if we are going to discuss mitigation and possible solutions and mitigation techniques, that it get posted appropriately so that all community members that want to hear about that, because right now, what's posted as it's on the agenda is the approval of a technology contract.
And as a practical matter, this is our last meeting for the month of August, and we know that there's this tremendous amount of interest in what's going to happen in our buildings relative to COVID. So it seems appropriate to have this conversation. Again, I don't think that we're necessarily outside of what we've required ourselves to do. But I respect your adherence to the rules and your desire to do that.
And I would certainly be amenable to having a special meeting called in the coming weeks.
Thank you. I do believe that we were discussing item C7, in which we did have questions for. I do believe that if we're going to talk anything that has to do with mitigation efforts or what we're going to do as a district, that we do that at a different time, or we do that in a place where we can have our community involved. As I know, this is something that is a hot topic for many people in our community. They are asking and sending us emails about how we will move forward. I do believe that is probably another conversation that we would need to have at another time. So if we could continue on with the agenda for this evening, I would like to continue to move on with that and ask if there's any other discussions or questions concerning the consent items before I make one statement concerning the consent items. Hearing none, I would like to address item C7 that is on our agenda for this evening. Many of you may have noticed that that agenda item did come out at a very late date. I just want the community and the board to know as well. That is something that we try not to be in the habit of doing, but we did feel there was an urgency to have this conversation about this. As we know, this is the only meeting that we are slated to have for the month of August. So you will not see this happen too much going forward, but we also wanted to make sure that we had this conversation so that we were able to approve this item. As we know, we need to get communication out to our parents and families as soon as possible. If there's no other discussions about the consent items, we have a motion by Ms. Sawyer and a second by Mr. Barron. Ms. Jenkins, could you please take the vote?
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Cody,
Yes.
Ms. Martirano,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
The consent items are approved 5-0. The next item on our agenda is D1, resolution fixing the date for a hearing on the proposed issuance of approximately $870,700,000 school infrastructure sales, services and use tax revenue funding bonds. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board give consent on the resolution fixing the date for a hearing on the proposed issuance of approximately $80,700,000 of school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue refunding bonds.
Could I get a motion in a second?
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Barron and a second by Ms. Martirano. Are there any questions or discussion? Ms. Jenkins, please take the vote.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Cody,
Yes.
Ms. Martirano,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
The vote is approved 5-0. The next item on our agenda is D2, resolution fixing the date for a hearing on the proposed deposit of monies received from sale of property into the general fund. Superintendent Ahart, could you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board give consent on the resolution fixing the date for a hearing on the proposed deposit of monies received from the sale of property into the general fund.
Can I get a motion in a second?
So moved. Martirano.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Martirano and a second by Mr. Barron. Is there any discussion or questions? Ms. Jenkins, please take the vote.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Cody,
Yes.
Ms. Martirano,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
The vote is approved 5-0. Next on the agenda, we have items of privilege. Are there any of my board colleagues that have any comments to share?
I would like to share a quick comment, Madam Chair. For those that are listening, if you are interested in running for the school board, with the election being in November, this Saturday, we are hosting an event of really learn how to be a board member. We are going to have our board governance coach, AJ Crable, in town to join us. Dr. Ahart will be sharing information on the district or the state of the district. We will also have an expert, Margaret Buckton, to talk school finances. So if you are interested in considering a run for school board, we would love to see you Saturday, and that is from 9 to 2. I'm trying to think, I know that there's information on our Facebook page and I believe on the website as well on how to register, and it's contacting Erin to put your name on the list. Thank you.
I would just add that that is open to all community members, not just those seeking or looking to run for the board. If you just would like to know how the board runs or more information about the district, it would also be beneficial for you.
Does anyone else have anything else to share? Dr. Ahart, I will turn it over to you for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. We got into a discussion about COVID-19 as we discussed the approval of the Edgenuity program, which will be the virtual option for elementary families who require that. I cannot emphasize enough to our school community, but to the broader community, how important it is to be paying attention to science and to be following the recommendations of the CDC and of the APA, and doing our level best to not only take care of ourselves, but to collectively take care of one another, which is the only way that we can get through a public health crisis like we've been experiencing for the better part of 2 years now. Our students need to be in school. We have tremendous ground to make up. We have tremendous opportunities that we want to avail ourselves of, especially our students. And we can best do that when everyone is in person, healthfully in person. So please, 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 if you've not received the vaccine, please get vaccinated. There's plenty to go around. If you're out in public, especially in enclosed places, please wear a mask. We can get through this successfully together, but it cannot be up just to school districts. It can't be up just to Polk County Health Department and Iowa Department of Public Health. It really takes all of us together to do the right thing for one another, to provide equitable opportunities and outcomes for all of our young ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahart. We thank you all for joining us this evening. This meeting is adjourned at 6:32 p.m. We will begin our work sessions shortly, which will be our board evaluation, guardrails, and superintendent evaluation.